Welcome, everybody, to Crime, Corrections, and Culture. Today, we are going to be discussing Chapter 4 of Down the Rabbit Hole, How the Culture of Corrections Encourages Crime. Remember, this is the show where you come for the truth about corrections. No hyperbole, no sensationalism, just the truth. Can you get the squeak toy away from the dog?
Give me a second.
Persephone has got to get the squeak toy away from the dog, otherwise I will lose my mind. I deliberately keep my dogs out of here so that they cannot be hounding me, pun intended. So, Persephone, I hope that you can get rid of the toys, get rid of the dogs, get rid of something, and then just come back and...
I'm not getting rid of the dogs, but I've taken the toy away. When I bought it, I didn't even realize it had a squeaker in it because it's like...
Okay. Either way, we love
like
super chats and super stickers. Remember that, folks.
Yes, we do. Okay, so today we're talking about Chapter 4, which is... I don't know if you've said this already.
I said Chapter 4, but I didn't name the title.
Okay, so today is Missed Opportunities. And which is talking about it's basically like a critique of the rehabilitation programming at the Connecticut Department of Corrections. And basically saying that the entire programming apparatus fails on 3 levels. Foundational philosophy is wrong, specific programs reinforce criminal thinking, and the staff implementing the programs are undertrained and disengaged.
Yes.
So before we get into the rest of it, do you want to talk about the 3 programs? That does come later in the chapter, but I think it would be helpful to talk about.
I think that it's important first to understand the proper framework for rehabilitating offenders so that you understand why these programs suck. Can you? Is there anything?
Just give me a sec.
I mean, this is getting to be ridiculous now with the dogs. I understand, though. I have dogs myself, and they can be a real pain. A real pain in the tuchus, as us Jewish folks like to say. Go ahead, Persephone. Okay, I hope you didn't kill the dog. I hope you just moved it. But go ahead, Persephone. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty, please.
So, yeah, they're usually very well behaved, which is why they're usually allowed in here. So the chapter starts with distinguishing between incarceration and programming. So incarceration, as you've said, is primarily about incapacitation, punishment, and deterrence.
Okay. Right. I believe that we're talking about the distinction between what is called custody and treatment. Am I correct? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Whereas custody deals with the sort of security and punishment aspect, and programming supposed to deal with the rehabilitation. Is that am I it's been, even though I co-authored it, it's been a while. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
So the one thing that I highlighted is programming central challenge. The central challenge for all of corrections really is that any lessons it attempts to teach, any insights it tries to impart, and any life skills it offers to the offenders in its charge ultimately have to be filtered through the distorting lens that is the criminal's worldview.
Yes, which we by and large addressed earlier on when we discussed the criminal thinking errors, which are available, I believe, on where, Persephone?
On the Everyday Ethics Patreon.
Okay, perfect.
Which is available at patreon.com/everydayethics. So incarceration is about incapacitation, punishment, and deterrence. And the lessons are implicit, but the programming is meant to actively harness that displeasure and build something constructive on it.
Yes.
But the programming has a fundamental structural problem because everything it tries to teach needs to be processed through the cognitive mechanisms that cause criminal behavior in the first place.
Right. So basically what the point is, what should be happening is that you remove a criminal from society because that criminal is a danger to society. The punishing aspects of corrections will seek as a deterrent and a motivating factor to reform, rehabilitate, habilitate, however you want to put it, become more responsible. And then programming should be teaching the lessons. Because even if you punish enough, even if you punish offenders till the cows come home, if you don't actually teach them how to live correctly, they won't know because the cognitive apparatus that we have is screwed up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing that you say is that the philosophy that underpins a program isn't a secondary concern, it's the primary concern. And a
Right.
program built on faulty premises um, about doesn't just fail, it actually makes things worse.
Yes.
And you do go on to give examples, which we'll get to.
We're going to get to. Right. So if a philosophy of a program is teaching, for instance, individual responsibility, a solid work ethic, using reason rather than emotions. Not, if this is the sort of underpinning of your philosophy, you're on solid ground, right? If your philosophy is, on the other hand, and you got to keep in mind the criminal thinking errors. If your philosophy is one of everybody's a good person. If your philosophy is criminals just make mistakes, or criminals are misunderstood, or they need to get in touch with their inner child, whatever, you're headed for disaster.
Yeah. So one of the important things that you cover is what you've identified as the 6 pillars of Samenow and Yochelsen's framework.
Right.
Do you remember what they are?
Well, I have them in front of me in a second. So, importantly, I want to just, very importantly, Dr. Samenow personally reviewed Down the Rabbit Hole. Is that up on the Patreon? His review?
No, not yet.
Okay. So we're going to have that up there soon. He wrote a review of this book in personal communication. He expressed how very much impressed he was with Brent and my interpretation of him. So this isn't just two schmucks who have tried to distill what he had to say. So the 6 pillars that we identified are the inviolability of choice, meaning that criminals, like everybody else, make choices. We are not determined beings determined by our genetics, our environment, or anything else. Reason over emotion. We need to use our minds and our thinking and not respond to how we feel. And once we change our thinking based on reason, the emotional changes will follow. Inculcating a healthy sense of guilt, meaning you have to make criminals feel bad for what they have done. This leads to an incentive to change the behavior, and also an incentive to keep changing because you don't want to ever feel that guilt. Confronting misbehaviors and thinking errors. So while you're in the program with the crooks, the criminals, whatever, inmates, you want to challenge their thinking as it occurs in the program, as it occurs in the thought reports that they've been doing. You want to challenge their irrational, irresponsible behavior, show them where they're wrong, and provide correctness. Repetition. Because of the concrete thinking of criminals, you have to repeat it over and over and over again so that we get it. Finally, clarification of self-interest, meaning you need to show the criminals that it's not in their own interest to be criminals. It's not in their own interest to violate other people's rights. It is, in fact, in their interest to be reasonable, responsible human beings. Okay.
Okay.
Back over to
So
Persephone.
so I would like you to go into a little bit more detail on some of these
Okay.
because so the inviolability, it's another word that I don't like, of choice. This
Yes.
sort of touches on the deterministic thinking and something that I think a comment that Reclusi made yesterday, poverty, like childhood
Right.
trauma, these all like
Yeah.
these cause people to become criminals. So can you go into
Right.
a
That
bit more
no
detail
matter
about
what,
this?
criminals are making choices. Whatever environment they're in, assuming they're not being absolutely destroyed mentally, brainwashed or, some such thing as that, they're still making choices, right? So I'll give you an example. When I was 17, I may have mentioned this already. I'm headed to my tutor, and I started to think about changing my life. I deliberately pushed that out of my head. I made a choice. As later on, while in prison, I made the choice to change, right? And I made the choice to put in the effort. I made the choice to continue doing so. Nothing is compelling me to do no environment, no genetics, nothing. Within a given environment, and even in a poverty-stricken environment, most people in those environments don't become criminals. And there are some people who are very wealthy that become criminals. The bottom line is that people make choices, and you have to focus on this when rehabilitating criminals, because if you teach them that they are determined, that means not their fault. That means you're encouraging the thinking error of victim stance. You're teaching them that change really isn't possible and maybe not even desirable.
Yeah. You also quote James Allen, circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to himself.
Yes.
And you cite, there's so many words that I'm struggling to pronounce today. Bioethicists,
Okay, bioethicists, yes.
Michael Kimberley and Paul Root Walp.
Okay.
Influence over behavior does not mitigate responsibility. Rather, failing to overcome influence is the very basis for culpability.
Yes, because you need to overcome these things. That's the whole point is of judging somebody ethically or criminally, is that they failed to overcome something, whether it be a desire, the environment, whatever.
Yeah. Akira says, I hate the whole idea that environment is everything. It is important, of course it is, but if it was everything, I'd be a criminal. At the very least, I'd be a drug addict. And I feel that that applies to a lot of people. If bad things happening in your life or bad things happening in your childhood automatically made you a criminal or whatever, then there would be a lot more criminals.
There would indeed.
Yeah. Um, so reason over emotion, I feel like we've covered that a lot.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to talk any more about that.
Sure. I mean, it's just that criminals use their emotions as excuses. They're very prone to talk about, I feel this way, I'm angry, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, whatever. And you want to get criminals to stop responding to how they feel, stop taking their emotions as evidence of something, and start thinking reasonably. Start to think conceptually, to draw realistic conclusions. And the thing is, once they do that, remember, emotions follow from thought. Emotions are a response to our values, to our beliefs. And if we alter those, the emotions will alter as well.
Yeah. And I mean, that ties into the first one, deterministic thinking, right? Because if you base everything on emotions, I feel sad because I had a shitty childhood, therefore I was bound to be a criminal.
Yes.
So the one that is, because we've spoken about this before, and I've mentioned before that I find it interesting, inculcating a healthy sense of guilt.
Right.
This, I don't know why, seemed counterintuitive to me.
Well, because the whole idea that so many people have is that you want people to feel good about themselves. So you want criminals to feel good and feel, like they're good people. The problem is they aren't. So what should I feel in response to the violent acts I've taken, to the thefts I've committed, to the robberies I've committed? Should I feel good about them? No, I should feel bad. Because you have, in the doctor's framework, you have two types of deterrence, internal and external. External deterrents are things like fear of getting caught, fear of punishment, social ostracism, prison, that sort of thing. Those are ultimately not enough because because, for instance, super optimism, you think you're going to avoid them. If you have the internal deterrent of conscience, of guilt, that follows you everywhere.
Yeah.
So I know when I do something wrong, I've developed my sense of guilt to such an extent, like it's extreme now. And I don't like that feeling. So I don't give a damn if nobody's watching. I don't want to feel that. So I
Mm.
don't do it. Even if I have a temporary motivation to do it, a temporary desire, whatever, I won't do it because I understand that feeling I hate. Criminals need to understand that they are not good people. Otherwise, why change?
Yeah.
You want to change because you want to be a good person. You want to have a successful life. That's why. So you want to inculcate a healthy sense of guilt.
But the other aspect of that is that one of the things that like you also mentioned is that criminals do think that they're good people.
Right. And you have to overcome that as a correctional counselor. They need to understand that no, this is not good. Doing these things is not good.
Yeah. So, confronting misbehaviors and thinking errors. So the staff needs to confront them directly and not provocatively.
Right. You don't want to be a jerk about it, right? You don't want to say, look, asshole, look what you're doing. You're a horrible human being. You want to be able to point out, okay, so what might you be doing right now? When you talk that way, when you're blaming the CO or the captain or the janitor or the other inmates or whatever, what criminal thinking error might you be engaging in? Obviously, victim stance. Okay, you're gambling. Okay, that's need for excitement. I don't think we covered that in here, but nevertheless, that is one of them. Is criminals have a high need for excitement. Okay, you were singing in the shower. Is that not failing to put yourself in prison? I mean, put yourself in the position of other people because you're not understanding how they would feel how you would feel if somebody were doing this to you. So you want to just really point these out with examples. Now, for Brett and I, when we ran our program, this was not that difficult when guys lived in the block with us because we would see what they were doing. The doctors relied on thought reports that the inmates would do, and then they would bring it to the group and they would dissect those thought reports. But either way, it's the same principle: is you want to identify where they're committing these thinking errors and offer correctives.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to. Greg asked a
I
question.
do want to answer it. So Greg wants to know, is there a significant difference in the thought process of inmates who violated proper laws and those who violated laws that should not exist? Not in my experience. And it does not mean that somebody, like if drugs were legal, that somebody selling drugs in that circumstance would exhibit these thinking errors. But remember, criminals, they like the unforbidden. They have a high need for excitement. They like fast cash. Their, hard work is anathema to them. So all those things make them seek out illegal activities. So the drug dealing, it's against the law. It provides fast cash. It puts them at risk, all of which is attractive to them. So it's not surprising that you would have a situation where guys who are doing things that there's nothing immoral about them per se, or they shouldn't be illegal, that they would nevertheless be exhibiting the criminal thinking errors.
Yeah, though, I mean, I guess my question, like that follows up on that, would be: is there a difference between someone who's like broken a law, like drug dealing, and someone who's just there because of like bad luck? You know, like not.
I don't think I've ever met a person in prison who was there for bad luck.
No, what
Except
I
for the
mean,
truly innocent, which is like, a
rare.
unicorn.
Yeah, but I mean, so you were speaking specifically about drug dealing, and I mean,
Yeah.
there are people who are in prison for just like possession of a relatively small amount of recreational drugs,
Yeah,
right?
I no, not in my experience. I'm not saying it never happens. Now, granted, I was in level 4 prison most of my time, so it's the most serious. But like first time offenders that get caught with a recreational amount of drugs generally don't end up in prison. And if they continue with the behavior, even after
Yeah.
getting caught, you're talking about somebody that's probably engaging in these thought processes.
Yeah, you make a good point, actually. Akira says at least you can fire a correctional officer if he's doing something wrong. I think rehabilitation would be more possible if the correctional officers at least followed the rules.
That's
Yeah,
true.
but if you I don't know if you watched the previous two episodes,
He
that
did.
like they don't often get fired for
No,
doing
I don't. I think he's saying that would be a good thing if you could at least fire them. I think the unions are horrible because the unions protect the officers regardless of their behavior, usually.
scroll. Okay, and then clarifying self in no repetition.
Right. You're talking about somebody that have a hard time learning from experience, don't think conceptually, are very prone to immediate gratification. They're going to forget. You have to continue to drill, teach the lessons over and over again, and give a variety of examples to illustrate the principle. Because just illustrating the principle to somebody that doesn't think abstractly isn't going to help. You've got to provide an abundance of concretes and teach them how to think in principle.
Yeah.
And that takes repetition.
So Yochelson and Samenow recommend 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for at least a year.
Yes. Now, I will say this. Subsequently to this book coming out, I don't just stop my thinking and stop my education in place. So I did read a number of other books on the subject of criminal thinking, criminal rehabilitation, and the risk need responsivity model put out by the I guess you'd call it the Canadian school, for lack of a better word, of Andrews and Bonta. They offer something not different necessarily. It is different, not contradictory from the doctors, but I don't think they would require the 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And also, they don't put the emphasis on guilt that the doctors do, but they do talk about effective punishment and that sort of thing.
Okay. And then the last one is clarifying self-interest. So,
Well, is it in your interest to commit a robbery? Is it in your interest to do drugs? Is it in your interest to get hammered every night? Is it in your interest to violate other people's rights, to burn bridges with family and friends? That's the thing, is you need to get them to think in terms of a lifetime rather than in terms of the immediate moment. They need to understand what is actually in their self-interest as opposed to what they think is in their own self-interest.
can I just share a personal thing quickly?
You can
So
do whatever you like, but
we're
if I get
talking
upset
about
about it,
we're talking about drugs, and my neighbor is smoking weed right now, and the
okay.
smell is coming. The
This
smell is
is
coming
why
into my
Claude
house.
says I have to rein you in.
It's just really distracting.
All right. So go to the next topic that you wanted to address.
Okay, so you identified three elements that shape a program's operating philosophy: the
Okay.
directives, the curriculum, and the values of the staff, right? And you've identified those as failure points.
Right. So you have the administrative directives, which talk about
Yes.
your programs. You then have the actual curriculum of the directive would basically that would set the general principles that the program should have, or
Yes.
that all programs should have. The curriculum is addressed to the specific program that you're taking, whether it be alternative to violence, tier 2, tier 3, commitment to change, whatever. That be the curriculum of the specific program, and then of course you have the attitudes of the specific people that facilitate the program.
So you also said that you called the directives critically deficient
Yeah.
because they don't define offender, criminal, or criminality. They treat criminality as a collection of specific need areas tied to the offense of the conviction.
Right. So what they're doing, if they tie it to the conviction, they don't understand. For instance, I've never been convicted in my life of a robbery. I've
Yes.
committed robberies. Um, well, I did get arrested for selling drugs, so that wouldn't be a good example. But my point is that I didn't get arrested for selling drugs until I was 21. I could very easily have ended up in prison prior to that conviction, and then they wouldn't have me as selling drugs. The point is that just because you're not convicted of a specific thing does not mean you've never done it. For instance, they had a program for domestic violence,
Yes.
right? Okay. Brent and I had both engaged in our lives in domestic violence. But because we don't have a conviction for it, they don't let us take the program for domestic violence. It doesn't matter that you go and say, listen, I do have a problem with this because I did. And I said, please let me take it. They said no. Interestingly, at the end of my sentence, when I'm getting ready to go out the door, they said, oh, by the way, you have to take this domestic violence program.
Why?
I have no idea. I'm just telling you that that's what happened.
So yes, that is actually something that you mentioned, that the domestic violence program is unavailable, even though like people who rob people and people who commit domestic violence, they share the same thinking errors, lack
Right.
of empathy, entitlement.
So, yeah. So if you had somebody that was in prison for selling drugs, let's say a significant amount of drugs, it's safe to assume in most cases those people have been involved in violence of some sort. Right? You don't generally rise to the top of drug organizations by being pacifists. But if you
Mm.
don't have a violent conviction, they don't let you take the alternative to violence program, the anger management, et cetera, et cetera. Not that those programs are good anyway, but I'm just saying that the fault lines start, the problems start with the directives. They start with your OAP, the Offender Accountability Program. By the way, my Offender Accountability Program started off with they put me in a lifers group. Um, it's called the Lifers Program. Now, they at the time of that I got my OAP, there was not any longer any Lifers Program, and there was also when there was, it wasn't a rehabilitation program. It was a program where inmates went and bitched about their lives. It had nothing to do with rehabilitation. Yet they put me in there, and they also put me in for industries where I was already working, so I didn't have to do anything new. And once I got fired from industries that never came off my OAP, I never stopped getting risk reduction earned credit, even though I wasn't there. They also put what was it? Drug program compliance. I never for years I never stepped foot in a drug program while that was on my OAP. I had done them beforehand, but but not while it was on my OAP.
It's ridiculous. Um, so you also talk about the staff training requirements, which are basically non-existent,
Right.
and it's a single item on a list of 33 items covered at the academy. So a maintenance worker or a food service employee could be assigned to run the programs.
Yeah. Technically, sure.
That's that's ridiculous.
um
Like,
I gotta say, I mean, look, I haven't actually seen maintenance guys running programs,
but
but
the fact that that's all the training
but
that
I
you
but
get.
I but I have seen correctional treatment officers, which a correctional treatment officer is somebody that is responsible for getting you your property. I have seen them assigned to run programs, and counselors who, by and large, are responsible for letting you make legal calls and classification and shit like that. Correctional counselors don't actually counsel you. That's not even in their job description. I'm not making that up. I mean, they just don't. Mental health attempts to do that. Mental health counselors, correctional counselors are something different.
Are these programs designed? That's a stupid question. I was going to say, are these programs even designed to work? Because if that's the training that a person needs
Okay.
in order to run them, it feels to me like it's an afterthought. Like, meh.
All right. So you have, like we talked about, you have the fundamental philosophy of the program, right? Which in most cases is pure garbage, and so is the curriculum, and therefore it sucks. Even if you have a well designed program, it's being facilitated by staff members that are irresponsible, that don't understand. It's what's called, I can't remember the exact word, but it's program integrity. And what they mean by program integrity is that the program has to be implemented as designed, so you don't even have that. So, in the case of an alternative to violence project, the program is poorly designed. It's not, it doesn't address what they call criminogenic needs or the criminal thinking errors that the doctors lay out. It can be quite honestly called what in the literature is known as correctional quackery, right? But then you have something like, say, a commitment to change, which is actually a program designed by Dr. Samenow, but it's being implemented by people who don't understand the philosophy. They don't understand how to challenge. They don't understand the thinking errors. So it ends up sucking.
Yeah. So you do talk about 3 programs, and one of them is the Alternatives to Violence program.
Right.
Which,
by the way, I was a facilitator of for many, many years.
So, developed by Quakers with no background in criminology and no theory of criminality, its core premise that offenders have been systematically disempowered and taught by oppressive authority structures to resort to violence.
Right.
Is
They're
essentially
victims.
the criminal's own victim stance rationalization.
Yeah. Yes. And that everybody's good. Right? Everybody's good. That's also in there.
So basically, the core exercises dealing with put downs, injunctions of childhood, masks, speak out, and 3 questions of oppression all cast the offender in the role of a victim.
Right.
This seems very dumb. This
it is,
program.
but the DOC doesn't have to pay for it because it's run by volunteers.
And the central technique is transforming power,
yes,
which the manual doesn't define.
Well, the manual says that you will have as many definitions as you do facilitators of this concept. And in talking to outside facilitators, the best definition I ever got of what transforming power is basically it's like the higher power in AA.
Yeah, so you describe it as tantamount to telling a violent offender to hope he doesn't hurt anyone.
Kind of. They say that transforming power is not something you can use. It's just something you can remain open to. And it's not to say there's nothing good in alternative to violence. I stayed a facilitator in that program because there was good things, and I tried to steer it sort of into that direction. So they have like value clarification, quick decisions, who am I? Like there were some very good exercises in there.
Yeah, but it's
the
also
anger escalator was another one, but it's just so rife with problems, to say the least.
So you also said that it's incompatible with the criminal's cognitive profile because the basic course is completed in 2.5 days.
Yes. Which
is a lot less than 3 hours a day, 5 days a week over the course of a year.
Yeah, it's I believe 4 hours Friday night, 9 or 10 hours on Saturday, and then about 6 hours on Sunday.
Yeah, so I mean, if you take into account like what the Samenow and Yochelson's thinking is, this is not effective, and the evidence is thin.
Yes.
Of 4 studies, 2 used self-reporting measures.
Yes.
Okay. So then the next one is Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
That you talk about. And
sure.
I mean, you've spoken about Alcoholics Anonymous before, and is it just Alcoholics Anonymous? Because I know you get Narcotics Anonymous as well.
They have both AA and NA in prison, yeah.
But I mean, they're basically the same.
Pretty much, yeah.
Ish, yeah. So you said it fails on 3 counts.
Yep.
So framing the entire problem in terms of addiction and ignoring the criminality itself.
Yes.
Attributing addiction to disease.
Yes.
Actually, talk about that a little bit more.
Well, give the other one first.
Um, the religious
Okay.
conversion experience is the solution.
Okay, so when you teach that criminals that addiction is a disease, you're talking to people that are prone to see themselves as victims and prone to make excuses. So when you tell them you have a disease of addiction, and then they think that their crimes are a result of that addiction, i.e., they're committing crimes because they have a disease, i.e., not their fault, they're victims of a disease. I was in a group once with somebody who literally said this. He said, "Why is it that when my cousin who has cancer relapse, everybody feels sorry for him, but when I relapse and start drinking, everybody gets mad, given that they're both diseases?"
I mean, I I sort of understand I sort of understand some of where people are coming from with the it's a disease thing. Sort of like if I squint, I can kind of see what the point is.
Okay, but it's
But
not relevant here.
no,
Whether
I
it
know.
is or is not relevant. That's the problem. Now, I don't think it is, but it's irrelevant when you have a program for inmates and you're teaching them that their behavior is a function of a disease, you're not helping them.
No, because you're just reinforcing that they're a victim. They
Right.
don't have any control over their choices.
Right. And the bottom line is whether you see it as a disease or not, overcoming it is a function of making the right choices. So it doesn't really matter whether you call it a disease in pure terms, but when you're telling inmates it's a disease, big problem.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just reinforcing what they already think that
Right.
they are
I once had
powerless.
an exchange with a correctional, not an AA counselor. And I said, I don't believe that addiction is a disease. She says, that's because you're in denial. And the thing is, how could I ever overcome that? There's nothing I can say because I'm in denial. So I pointed out, well, uh, I know psychologists who argue it's not a disease. Are they? I mean, are they in denial as well? And you get nothing. I mean, there's no. It's just
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah, I don't know how you are supposed to.
No, so Akira Felix, no, and this is part of the reason that AA, AVP are so prevalent in prison systems because they're run by outside volunteers, so you don't have to pay them.
Um okay, and then the other one, oh, and AA keeps no statistics on relapse rates, which is something that
Yes,
Greg
if they
asked.
now if they do now, this book was written started in 2000, I think 15, published in 2017. So some of this stuff might be outdated. They might be keeping stats now, but
Well, I mean, considering it's anonymous, I think it would be
it's
fairly
very difficult
difficult.
to. Yes, it is.
But I just looked this up, and so addiction specialists cite success rates between 8 and 12%, and that's not necessarily permanent abstinence, just
Right.
sustained abstinence.
So
A
what they would
20
say is that those people are people who fail to work the program. So basically, by definition, they'll say it works because, and of course, it's true because they call for abstinence. And if you're not abstinent, you're not working your program. You failed. But I don't want to make it about AA. The
No.
point of this is about AA as applied to criminals is the problem.
And then the third program you spoke about is A Way Out.
Yeah, a way out.
Well, that's what it is.
I know, a way out program. I don't remember what the hell the program was. It's been so long. Can you refresh my memory a little bit?
Yes. So, it was Robert. No, it was Robin. I can't pronounce his surname, but it starts with a C. And the framework holds that all human beings have an innately good core self, the true self or the free self or the essential self, and that,
Oh, okay. This is based on the book Houses of Healing.
yes.
Okay, yeah. I never took this program personally. This Brent took this program. But I mean, if you tell me I remember the basis of it, I can still talk intelligently about it.
So, bad behavior is produced by defensive sub personalities
Yeah,
developed in response to childhood trauma and environmental injustice.
yeah,
The criminal isn't who he appears to be, his criminality is a coping mechanism created by a world that failed him.
right. Again, he's the victim.
Yes. So the practical effect of this is creating a buffer between the criminal and his bad behavior.
Right.
Because if your true self is good and it's your sub personalities that like were created by the injustices, then once again, you're not responsible, you're the victim, and that is just reinforcing exactly what they already think about themselves.
Exactamundo.
And there was no credible evidence of effectiveness, and any research available is just informal self-report surveys commissioned by the
Right.
student's own foundation.
I believe she's a woman, but either way. So
That's
if anybody reading the book, as
sexism.
opposed to me being here talking about it, you will see that it's heavily, and I mean heavily, footnoted. We have a lot of sources a lot of research went into the book. So we had not only our own personal experience, which at the time was each, believe, 2 decades in prison when we started writing the book, or roughly 2 decades in prison. But there's a lot of research that went into it, and nothing that I've subsequently read, which is also a lot, has demonstrated that we are wrong.
Yes. So there are like a ton of footnotes, and also when talking about all of these programs, there's a lot of little notes that discuss like in AVP like what the exercises are.
Yes.
Um anyway. And then there was a case study which was specifically about Carlos.
Yes, Carlos, my friend Carlos Rebolo. Yeah, he actually took the program. I want to say it was Thinking for a Change.
Was it?
I think so.
Let me scroll. Um Good intentions, bad decisions.
Ah, yes. Good intentions, bad decisions. Yes, Thinking for a Change was a different one. Yes, I remember this. Okay.
So this was actually documented session by session.
Yes.
And there were 4 staff members running the program, 3 housing unit counselors, and a corrections treatment officer.
Which are what I described earlier. It sounds like you're hearing treatment and you're hearing counselor. These are not mental health professionals.
So, and they admitted during the program that they were unfamiliar with the material. Their primary job duties were administrative.
Yes, and by the way, the material was based on Dr. Samenow.
So, some of the Akira says, so you guys took different programs.
Sure. A lot of the same ones too.
How much of your day is like how much of your like prison sentence is like attending programs?
Not a lot.
Because I mean,
It depends who you are, what's on your OAP, what jail you're in. I mean, the last 6 months of my sentence, I was in Tier 4, which is basically a drug program within the institution. So there, a lot of my day was dedicated to this stuff. But
generally speaking,
no,
not really.
not much. I mean, you can go to AA once or twice a week, whatever. You know what I mean? But not a whole lot.
Mm-mm. So some of the failures that you documented.
I want to get into. So he says, I make it sound like programs were a big part. Well, the programs are there, and they ought to be a big part, right? It doesn't mean that they are. It doesn't mean that they are ubiquitous. They do have a lot of different programs. Their programs run every day, but how much a given inmate actually spends in those programs is a different story altogether. But if you're in a program, say like tier 2 or tier 3, well, then you're going to programs, 3-4 times a week. If you're doing AVP, you go for the weekend. If you're doing anger management, it's once a week. Good intentions, bad decisions, I think was once a week as well. Okay.
But I mean, also, if you're talking about how the culture of corrections encourages crime, then you have to talk about the programs and how they
Yes.
are a failure,
Sure.
even if they're not a huge portion of what people do during the day. If you want the prison system to fulfill its function of rehabilitating
Yeah. Do you want to talk
criminals,
about some of the stuff that Carlos experienced in this group? I think it's
yes. So a staff member answered what causes heinous crimes by referencing the plot of a Denzel Washington movie,
Fallen, right?
Fallen, in
Yeah.
which an evil spirit jumps between bodies, causing people to commit crimes. That's heinous. Just that.
It's ridiculous.
That's terrible. Staff laughing when an inmate described a domestic assault.
Yeah.
That's not right.
Nope.
Staff laughing when an inmate made demeaning comments about women.
Yeah.
That's not great.
Do you want to share the demeaning comments? I think it's important that people understand just what is going on here.
Yeah, I need to find it. Give me a second. What I need is to stay away from hoes. What I want is a girl with a nice round butt and all that.
Yeah, and the staff laughed at this. What about the correctional officer who, or the facilitator, whatever the hell she was from the group? She says, my brother just got out of prison, and I'm telling him he got to be easy because I don't want to have to cut a bitch.
Relax, because these bitches out here crazy, and I don't want to have to cut a bitch.
Right. So a staff member is saying that to a group of inmates who are presumably taking this program so that they can change their thinking. And then, of course, there was the standard question, why don't we just fast forward through the videos so that we can get the hell out of here as quickly as possible?
So, but this thing about cut a bitch was during a conversation about safe sex, which somehow makes that even worse.
Utterly ridiculous.
So, two groups were merged, doubling the size and halving the individual engagement. Yeah. Sessions cancelled 1/3 of the time. Yep. 3 weeks of curriculum done in 90 minutes. 5 curriculum discussion pauses disregarded entirely. The final session completing 5 sessions in 2 hours. And the program running for just 13 of the 21 hours it should have.
Yes.
And when Carlos asked about his completion certificate, CTO Sakuta said, I was just there to push a button. I don't know anything.
Right. Interestingly, so subsequent to the book coming out, CTO Sakuta said to Carlos, oh, I'm just here to push buttons.
How? So Akira said, like, it sounds like they were created to fail. Sounds like it's supposed to fail. I don't know if I would necessarily go that far, but it all really sounds like they didn't give a shit. Which
no, they
is
don't.
not.
It's not to say nobody that works in prison. The volunteers care. That's why they're there.
Yes.
And there are some people that work in programming that do care. I have come across that. But if I was a correctional counselor, and I don't mean the kind that just deals with the inmates. I mean somebody that's actually helping them to change. I would be up to date on all the latest techniques, all the latest findings, and I had a conversation with one of them. And what are you reading? Oh, nothing. What? That's insane to me. Like, I would want to know cutting edge every single thing that I could be doing that would help me be better. And that just wasn't there.
Yeah, but I mean, you're also not talking about like the small percentage of people who actually give a fuck. Because if the dominant culture is like, we don't care, we're we're like exhibiting the same criminal thinking behaviors that you have a problem with. We don't give a fuck whether these programs actually work. That's bad, even if there are one or two good people.
It's horrible. Is that a good place to stop?
Yeah, yes.
You have another
They,
question? If
I
you do,
have,
I'll answer it.
I have a couple. Well, the you end on talking about the recidivism rate in Connecticut,
Yeah.
which is 79%, which within 5 years of release.
Yeah. At the time of the
And
writing of the book.
yes, and that's the practical outcome of these programs when the Department of Corrections mission is responsive evidence-based practice, which you then called laughable.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
That's what I wanted to end on. It's not like you're just complaining, or it's not like we're saying, well, these programs are stupid. That there's tangible evidence that at least at the time it is laughable to say that it was evidence based
Yeah.
and effective.
Yeah. And the thing is there's always the fallback. What do you expect? They're criminals. Right? It's always that. Well, they're criminals. What do you expect? There's really nothing that can be done. We try.
So, I mean, it's really tough because, again, I come back to the question, do you think that in these programs specifically, the programs exactly as they are, right? So you mentioned that there were parts of alternative surveillance that were good. And I think you also described the good intentions, bad decisions program as being like the most philosophically robust.
Well,
Do you
with
think,
Dr. Samenow.
yeah. So do you think that if nothing else changed, if those programs remained exactly as they were, and the staff at least were trained, actually trained, and there were actually some standards in the people who ran these programs, do you think that they would be more effective, changing nothing else?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you do some things better, then you're going to get some better results.
That was really the only question I had.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Persephone. Thank you, audience. We will be back here Monday, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time, for more truth about corrections. We thank you all. Good night.
Bye.